The Intruder in the Basement by Jessica Parker. There was this time long ago that I was in charge of watching my cousin and his 4 friends while they slept over. My uncle was paying me $100 to watch them for the night. All I did was play video games with a bunch of 10-year-olds for most of the evening. I thought it would be the easiest money I ever made, but things took a huge turn for the worse when I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. We were in the basement, still playing video games. 2 of the kids also heard the sounds. I counted 5 kids sitting on the couches, and neither my aunt nor uncle were supposed to be home that night. My heart started racing as I realized the basement door was wide open. I told them to stay put while I ran upstairs to shut the door. The door didn't have a lock from the inside, only the outside. I called to the kids to hide in the workout room. I shut the TV and all the lights, then followed them into the workout room. We listened in the dark as the footsteps approached the basement door. Then came the horrible sound of the basement door opening, followed by heavy steps stomping down each stair one by one. The sound echoed through the silent basement, making my skin crawl. One of my cousin's friends started crying. I had to tell them to shut up. I leaned against the door with a chair, along with a bunch of barbell weights wedged against it. My heart was pounding so loud I was afraid the intruder would hear it. I listened as the door to the boiler room opened and a few moments later closed. Screams of children filled the room as the doorknob to the workout room began to turn. I pushed the door with all my might to keep it shut. The wood creaked under the pressure as whoever was on the other side tried to force their way in. Sweat dripped down my face as I strained against the door. Suddenly they gave up, and we heard rushed footsteps going up the stairs. I held my breath, listening to the footsteps right above our heads, moving in the direction of the front door. This was before everybody had cell phones, so calling for help wasn't an option. After what felt like hours of terrified silence, I finally worked up the courage to leave the workout room. I scanned the whole house, finding that the front door had been left open and all the bedrooms upstairs had been trashed. Nobody was in the house, so I called the kids up. A few things had been stolen, but as long as nobody was hurt, we were all relieved. As I tried to calm the kids down, I remembered a verse my grandmother always recited, "And whoever fears Allah, He will make for him a way out." It gave me some comfort knowing we had made it through safely. But I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal wasn't over. What if the intruder came back? What if there had been more than one person? The questions haunted me long after that night was over. The Blizzard Break-In by Amanda. It was during a blizzard in Valley Stream. I was getting paid $250 to watch some couple's kid while they went away for the weekend. His name was Matthew. This took place on the first night, which was a Friday. Matthew was already supposedly asleep while I was in the living room watching a movie. I got a knock at the door and looked at the clock. It was close to midnight. There was no way I was opening it. Not even 10 seconds later, I heard the sound of 2 or 3 men angrily banging on the door, telling me to open up. I felt like my heart was about to stop. I took a peek through the blinds, and there was somebody standing right on the other side of the window. I fell back in fear, and after managing to get back on my feet, I ran to the kitchen phone first thing to call the police. They said because of the weather, it could take a while for an officer to get here. They wanted to keep me on the line, but I wasn't thinking clearly in the heat of the moment and hung up. However, it wasn't until I ran through the living room that I realized the banging had stopped. I took a second peek through the living room window. Nobody was there now. I heard the sound of glass shattering from a few rooms over. My knees started to feel weak as I realized they had just broken the window and were about to climb into the house. The icy wind howled through the broken glass, sending chills down my spine. I had to run and get Matthew. I couldn't just leave without him. Of course, when I got upstairs, there was no time left to run back downstairs, as I already heard footsteps and laughter coming from below. I covered Matthew's mouth with my hand as I ran with him into his toy closet. A few minutes dragged on to what felt like half an hour as we sat there in the dark closet. The smell of mothballs and plastic toys filled my nostrils as I tried to steady my breathing. Matthew began to squeal as footsteps on the carpet reached the outside of his bedroom door. There was more than one person. They came inside. There weren't many places to hide in this room. I was actually reflecting on my whole life, so sure I was going to die. The closet door creaked slightly as someone walked by, and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't notice. We heard the sound of a police siren outside, even from in the closet, and then I heard one of the men in the room mutter a curse. I opened the door back up as I heard at least 3 pairs of footsteps hurriedly rushing down the stairs. They didn't get far, as the police later found their footprints in the backyard leading to the shed. There were 5 men in total, and they were all arrested. As the police took our statements, I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if the storm had delayed them longer. How close had we come to a much worse fate? In the days that followed, I found myself repeating a verse I'd learned as a child. Allah is the best of planners. It helped me make sense of how everything had unfolded that night. But even as I tried to move on, the memory of those terrifying moments in the closet stayed with me. The sound of footsteps outside the door, the feeling of Matthew trembling against me, the certainty that at any moment we would be discovered. Those sensations haunted my dreams for weeks. The Forest Stalker by Tyler Matthews. I was 15 years old, still babysitting since I couldn't get a real job. This was by far the most horrifying experience of my life. Me and this kid I was babysitting, his name was Mike, were taking a walk with his dog through the woods in his backyard. The air was crisp and the leaves crunched beneath our feet as we ventured deeper into the forest. Suddenly, Mike's dog stopped, ears pointed up straight and paw in the air. The dog started barking, pulling and going crazy. He noticed something and we were nervous that it was a black bear, so I told Mike to turn around and walk back to the house. My heart was pounding as I struggled to pull the dog in the other direction. That's when I noticed what he was barking at. Beyond a big tree was some guy just standing there staring up at me. A chill ran down my spine as I locked eyes with the stranger. I yelled out, asking to him if he needed something, and with that he turned around and walked off. I was genuinely freaked the statues out. The dog calmed down at this point, so walking back was easier for a few minutes, until yet again the dog started freaking out about something behind us. I couldn't see what it was, but I was worried it was the same guy as before, and that he might have been following me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I imagined the stranger silently stalking us through the trees. I was tempted to unleash the dog on this guy, but that seemed like a bad idea. I didn't look back for the rest of the way back to the house, but the dog continued to bark and pull. I did the best I could to run or at least walk fast. The sound of twigs snapping behind us only fueled my panic. I made sure for a good half hour that we weren't followed to the house, checking every window and door routinely. My hands were shaking as I peered out into the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. I thought it was safe to eventually play Mario Kart with Mike and forget about what happened. But my worst fear came true when right outside the window in the patio, I heard the sound of one of the toy buckets falling over. Turning on the patio light, I could see that a green bucket full of beach toys and balls had been knocked over. There was no way some small animal could do that. The dog was once again going crazy, barking at something. I told Mike to get me his dad's hunting rifle. Maybe that was dumb, to have an 8-year-old get a gun for me, but I didn't have time to think rationally. There continued to be strange noises coming from all around the outside of the house. There were some taps on the window's chimes, being pushed, things falling over, but I eventually caught a glimpse of him through one of the windows. He was walking past until he noticed me and stopped. I lifted the gun up to show him that we were armed. He didn't run away right away, though. He stood there crouched like some kind of creature, staring right into my soul. His eyes seemed to glow in the darkness, piercing through me. He finally walked back into the woods. I didn't sleep much that night, jumping at every small cracking noise. The words of the Quran echoed in my mind. and Allah is the best of protectors, and He is the most merciful of those who show mercy. I clung to that thought, desperately seeking comfort in the face of this unseen threat. A week later, I got a call from Mike's parents. They told me a creepy-looking man had been stalking their house from the woods. They asked me to describe what the man that I saw looked like again. I couldn't give a good description, as I didn't see much of his face, but I assured them it was the same man. They practically begged me to babysit on a few occasions after this, but I always respectfully declined. That was a while ago, and I have no idea what's become of this family today and what's become of the man stalking their house. The memory of those glowing eyes in the darkness still haunts me to this day. The Invisible Playmate by Rachel. I would frequently babysit back between the ages of 15 and 18. I lived close to a relatively wealthy area where people were more generous in terms of pay. There was never a shortage of need for babysitters either, so I made a decent amount of money. I've definitely had to take care of some strange kids, but this one takes the prize. Right from the moment I met Michael, he seemed really quiet and weird. He was 12 years old too, which some might argue is more than old enough to be home alone, but maybe not overnight. They needed me to stay overnight. His parents told me he could be a bit strange sometimes and may need some extra attention. I didn't really need to do much, though. In the room that I would be sleeping in was a huge toy closet, big enough to fit a big Lego play table with a bunch of Legos and other toys sitting on top of it. Michael was up there for most of his time, building with Legos and other toys. The soft clicking of plastic bricks was a constant background noise. I didn't really spy on him too much. I just let him do his own thing, but I heard him constantly talking in there as if someone were with him. Not play talking. I could only assume he had some kind of problems, and that's what his parents were hinting at. His hushed whispers and occasional giggles sent shivers down my spine. He came down eventually to eat some of the leftovers in the fridge, but then went right back up to his closet. It wasn't until I finally told him it was time to go to sleep that he left the closet. I just wanted to go to sleep, myself. The house fell into an eerie silence as I settled into bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to sounds coming from the closet, sounds of toys like Legos. I called out to Michael to go to sleep. The sounds stopped. The light wasn't on in the closet, so I was confused as to how the hell he could be playing in the dark. My heart raced as I strained my ears in the darkness. I went over to open the closet and turned the light on. Michael didn't seem to be in there. I missed the noises. I wasn't a paranoid person. I fell back asleep. The soft ticking of the clock was the only sound in the room. I'd say an hour later, I woke up to partial brightness in the room. The closet light was on, but the door was shut. I called Michael's name again. I was pissed now. I saw the outlines of feet at the bottom of the closet door, and then heard a little giggle, as if Michael were messing with me. I knew he was in there now. I marched over and threw open the door and literally fell back in horror when nobody at all was in there. Where the two outlines of feet were there was nothing now. I felt a pain in my chest from the fear. The room seemed to spin around me as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I ran to Michael's room to find him asleep in his bed. I locked his door and laid down on his floor. Just being next to another person made me feel a little safer. I fell asleep on the floor, and when the parents returned the next day, I decided to keep quiet about what I witnessed. I say what I witnessed because I know it happened. I got paid and left, and never had to worry about it again. Of course, it still sends chills up my spine thinking about it, and I still have no idea what to believe. The words of the Quran came to mind. And among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations in your languages and your colors. Verily, in that are signs for those who know. Perhaps there were things in this world beyond my understanding. As I drove home that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted in my perception of reality. What if there really was an invisible presence in that house? What if Michael wasn't alone in that closet after all? The questions lingered unanswered, leaving me with a deep sense of unease that I've never quite been able to shake.